All right, just waiting on Rick. Oh, let's see. Where we at? How y'all doing? Let's see. It's all right. There we go.
Yep.
Might happen a little quicker now that you verified and all. Huh?
Oh, shit.
You know,
Blue checks got perks.
the blue check account.
Well,
Oh shit.
little did we know you just had to add a URL.
Yeah, right.
Gosh. Space Cadet.
It's always good to I guess, that way people know where to get the information.
Yeah, no, it's good. Little baby steps, right?
That's it.
You got a little break in the training, obviously, huh? How many guys you work with this morning?
Oh shit. The pro day guys are coming in. AB comes in the gym some days and does some stuff with the Vertimaxes, the Raptors, but so a couple of them's coming in still. And then we have I had Jameis, I had Carl came in this morning, the rugby Carl.
How's he doing?
He's good, dude. He's pain free and doing his thing or whatever. So, he feels good. But then Andreas is on his way over. I got 1 o'clock, I got the podcast.
That's right.
So
let's jump into it then, because I know we had some questions come in, and that's another thing, guys. Like, if you want to, we're dropping posts all the time, and we had somebody drop a question in the comments section for the upcoming IG Live. So if you guys are ever, something sparks your interest or you have a question come to mind, just drop it in the comments section or drop it in a DM, and that way we can kind of maybe elaborate on some of those concepts here. And that's really the goal, is to touch on some things that are maybe a little confusing or maybe not as clear in some of the posts. But so 2 questions, or let's start with one that came up, was the ACL tear. So people are trying to kind of understand, why the bow, where does that come from in relationship to preventing an ACL shred. So I kind of wanted to break down or take a little deep dive to how an ACL is going to tear in a non-contact scenario, but you could really take this to the contact as well. And that's the interesting thing about those shapes, or about those behaviors, and which way the bones are going, and the disharmony at the foot level is really no different as far as a non-contact or a contact injury. And when we say contact, we're talking about a direct blow to the joint segment that then tears. So that would, like the old Tom Brady ACL that he took to the front knee, where like literally a helmet goes to the joint segment that's affected. But in a
that's why it's described, like the Mayo Clinic and Tim Hewitt and them describe a contact injury as a blow to the affected area.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that clears it up, because you'll see scenarios where, a non-contact, like the freshest one in my mind would be the Kyler Murray incident this past season. But there's also ones, I think a J.J. Watt had a scenario like this. You see it a lot on the D-end O tackle settings where it's upper body contact. I think Odell had something similar, Saquon, where there's upper half contact, but the lower half is not actually being affected. So what is going on in those non-contact scenarios? So what we've identified with the tape is in what we call is that reverse gear with the leg. So your lifting engine is your reverse engine. And I think you kind of start there. And what's happening is the exact opposite of the bow. So if this is my foot and this is my shin, what happens in a non-contact scenario is they're going to plant inner ankle bone low. So they're going to land and they're going to use that sort of inner corner, that heel, as more of the anchor inside the foot. So they'll collapse that foot. And when they collapse the foot, understand that the front of the foot's moving this direction, the back of the foot's moving this direction. And as that's happening, the shin is actually turning forward, down, and in. So remember, in our bow, we're the opposite. We're inner ankle bone high, and our shin turns down, back, and out. And that keeps everything safe. That loads the Achilles. That keeps the shin bone and the thigh bone in harmony. But when I land with inner ankle bone low and my shin goes forward, down, and in, well, now the forces from the front of the foot turning this way, the back of the foot turning this way, they essentially create a bunch of like force this way that keeps the shin locked down and in. So it's really like you kind of ski boot your shin bone. And when you land with the shin and the thigh inward, so the kneecap would be pointing inward now, you land in what we would call a reverse bow. Well, now your only chance to create that torque to then propel yourself forward is to try to take that shin and turn it outward. But remember, when the foot collapses like that, and the front of the foot forces go this way and the back of the foot forces go that way, it creates a block on sort of the outside of the foot. So that shin gets locked. It's trying to turn out, but it can't. Well, above it is the thigh bone, and that thigh bone is going to be clear to move because it's just ligaments in between. So what happens is the athlete starts in, they try to turn out, the shin gets stuck, the thigh keeps going, and as the thigh keeps going outward, the knee ligaments are going to shred. So overall, what they're trying to do is they're trying to land inner ankle bone low. They're trying to take the shin forward, down, and in, and then take it up and out. And so when they try to go up and out, the shin gets stuck, the thigh keeps going, and that's shredding the knee. So now what we do at GOATA is we train people away from that behavior. That's why you see us put a premium on inner ankle bone high, getting the heel up, making sure that your ankle can play like a ball and socket so it can stay in harmony with the hip above. So if the shin bone and the thigh bone are on the same page, then your knee can just be its hinge, because that's really what it is. It's just going to hinge up and down as the ankle and the hip stay on the same cadence. But like that joystick analogy, they're doing the movement and the foot's going to hold still so that they can, right? So the foot holds still so that the shin and the thigh can do the movement, and they'll work down, back, and out. Then they'll come up, around, and in. And that cadence there keeps everything safe. It keeps the foot in a steady position. It keeps the shin loading that Achilles correctly. It keeps the hip on the same cadence as the shin. And then my knee never shreds because we don't have disharmony between the shin and the thigh. So that's why we talk about the lift the way that we do, is because, well, first, that stems from what we saw in the ACLs. So it didn't come from a place of like, well, lifting's bad, it's just don't do lifting. No, it came from a place of when we looked at the non-contacts and we saw what was taking place in all those ACLs, and then you can take the same foot error to the Achilles. It's just now a disharmony between the foot and the shin, as opposed to a disharmony between the shin and the thigh. And that's going to be based off of where you're stepping in that matrix of, you know, an endless sea of possibilities that could be in a compass around you, essentially. Well, when we're watching these ACL shreds, we're seeing a shin start in, we're seeing a thigh start in, and we're seeing it try to set a reverse with the inside of the foot and the heel down, and then it's trying to drive out. Well, that same behavior, then we saw it in the heavy back squat, we saw it in the deadlift, we definitely saw it in the Olympics. And so we were like, well, we can't train are locomotive athletes like this because they're not really lifters at heart. They're locomotion. They're moving through space. And when you move through space, you got to have that heel up. You got to have a strong foot platform, and you got to let the columns just wave out and then in, out and then in as pressure builds up and as pressure goes to release. So that's kind of a quick Cliff Notes version of how the ACL shreds, why we train the bow, and then in conjunction with that, why we walked away from some of those traditional strength building exercises like a heavy back squat, like a deadlift, or like an Olympic, which, Gary, you were, when Gilly brought this to you, you were in that world. You were in that sort of, training those derivatives.
Yeah. Well, and it took a while to really see, like, going from like, you know, traditional back squats and stuff like that, and how that the foot and ankle is where it all starts. So when you take the athlete and you start just loading them up, and it's the weight has a lot to do with it too, but it's the behavior that's created through the process. Because when you take that athlete and, you know, it was always a slight turnout with the back squat, and then, you know, you want to get back here, so you got a couple of things going on. And what happens is the more weight we started lifting, the more we started to turn out, right? So you're either going to see this, and then when you start making this movement right here with a lot of weight and you're driving through the heels, okay? And then some people will try to teach it like this, and, you know, you take a kid that's front chain dominant and he don't have no length, and you try to get him to go butt back, he starts to spin here and he ends up hinging anyway with a down and in. So you take that behavior and you rep it out over and over again. When the bow setting becomes a landing, inner ankle bone high, and this needs to be able to open. So you take this position here where you open it up and you go down into the squat, and you change that to a hinge. Now when the athlete steps forward, he can't do this if he's got a straight foot, so he starts a duck-footed landing. Now, if he's going inside ankle bone low, then you could have a joint issue. If he's going, and then it becomes muscular because he's got to take this and try to corner, because you're still going to see a slight try to bow, and then they can't pull a corner off because they don't have no space, so they start pushing, and they take that hinge and they start moving it through space. You got to go back and decompress the ankle, get that talus to sit up high so that it can land, load. So we go, that's like what we've been talking about, right? Like cues to try to get the ass back to where we take this and we pull it open, where we can keep the inner ankle bone high, and this just climbs. The deeper or the louder the volume, the deeper I'm into my dig phase, I got to be able to get more bow. So if I see a guy that's got to make a change in direction now, and he sticks the foot out and this happens, that's your ACL, right? It gets stuck in place instead of this. Because he can't do it no more. Like they got the one video on Ed Reed, dude, he's like coming way around like this, and he foot right here.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Looks like he's gonna be pre-cornered, and then all of a sudden you just see this shift. Inner ankle bone goes, and then boom, he just goes straight through and he finishes. It's because the resiliency of the body is in the IT band, it's in the glute and the hamstring, and you gotta find it back through here. You can't find that shit on the inside. There's no support, there's no security. That's why the track and field world's so fucked up. It's because everything was built around this. Boom, boom. So they think they're driving force. Dude, when you look at that shit, if 100 years ago somebody would have had an iPad, the track and field world wouldn't be doing this. Boom. You know what I'm saying? They would be moving rows and cornering, because that's how the body travels through space. And they would have took the speed element and developed the programs around that, instead of what you have now. So when you see that ankle joint, when we say it's a ball and socket, I don't give a fuck what you call it. But the behavior is that of a ball and socket. I don't care what doctor said it or whatever, but when I look at it at the highest level with pressure in it, you see that foot strike, inner ankle bone high, and this is opening. If it don't open, you fucked. Bottom up. And it's going to catch up with you, and I use the terminology, the phrase all the time. It's a pound of coke in the trunk, dog. You only get one chance, dog. You fuck up that one time and get caught, your whole career could be over with.
You could ride, you could ride, like you used to always say last weekend, you could ride around that car with that pound of coke 70, 80, 100 times. It only takes one time to where you're busted for life. And that's the analogy of the ACL shred or the Achilles pop, right? It only takes that one time, but you've been patterning it, you've been training it. Can you talk a little bit, because you've had some high level athletes in there with a lot of, damage, right? Like Achilles problems, ACL tears, multiple ACL tears. can you, because one of the other questions, and this leads into it perfectly, somebody was asking, can you give us a little understanding of like when to use child rockers versus when to use toe tuck rockers versus when to use bow wall sit versus when to use bolt hold? Can you talk a little bit about like, because you're so good at like prioritizing decompress first. Like we just had this discussion today, you, me, and RJ, about we got to create space with people before we even try to get them into a no support drop-in.
So it depends on the eval, right? So like, first of all, I gotta evaluate, and then I'll go after like low-hanging fruit straight up. If I get a guy comes in here and he's like this and he's duck-footed, then I gotta take that guy, put him on the ground, put his toes together and sit him down and say, where are you at with this? What are you feeling? Are you feeling the shins locked up? Are you feeling the top of the ankles? Are you feeling lower back? Are you feeling the hips? And then from this point, that's where I know. So the film tells me one thing, I verify it when I put him on the ground, and then I go into the process where we want to keep this down because it's easy to get there, right? So if I sit there and I load this hip up, you feel a pressure. Do you feel a pressure in the hip? You feel that. Now it's a drop-in, so I'm going to load this system up. I'm going to get the head into the column. I'm going to find the glute. Once I feel that activation, I can pulse and heat this tissue. Once I heat that tissue up, I can slide deep as I can into it and work right here. And then as I start to get better, now I can start to move into the hip a little bit more, start to rotate in it. But if I don't own this position before I go to the next phase of this whole thing, and I can't get myself down to where I could do this, right? And sit on this and open this stuff up, then I can't ever change that behavior because I'm never going to have the space at the ball and socket of the ankle and the hip for that to work this way. They have to work in synchrony. If I can't do that, if I can't open that up, then I can't go forward. If too many people want to jump straight into a weight training exercise or grab a plate or do a lunge or go run 10 miles or go run and they're not there yet. You're not ready. You can't take 20 years of bad shit and bring it back. And this kind of falls into this guy just asked about bones problems or something like that, dealing with bone deformation. So what happens is, I just fixed this guy's hip a couple of years ago. He had a surgery where they went in there and they took a piece of his shin bone and they put it in his hip. And what happened is he just had atrophy because everything was so locked up. The circulation wasn't there. The capsule wasn't open. Blood flow was restricted. When their bones ain't getting it, they start to deteriorate over time, right? So he goes and he's got 2 years before the next surgery because they're going to rehabilitate this other side. In the 2 years, I fixed the other hip because I opened the capsule up and it was able to regenerate. Soft tissue, bones, and things like that shit regenerates over time. You got to give it a chance to do it. But you gotta follow the process and you gotta do everything right. Going back to where we was, ADHD. So I jump around, but you open the hip socket up, you get that. Now I have the space to get back into the back chain. I can take the tail to crown, I could get that spine long and decompressed, and I could sit up here and I could start working into the feet. I could pull the hips up, I could get active with it. I could sit in these positions and load this stuff up. Head in the columns, let the brain, the neuroplasticity and all of that stuff, all of those terms that they talk about building patterns and stuff, let that shit sit. Let it cook up in there. Let it marinate. Stay up in there. From New Orleans, we cook everything right. Get the hip right here. Load it up. And then I start to work from here start moving the socket. Start opening everything up like this. Because all I'm doing is I'm going back to this, because this was what the baby did. It just loaded the hip, and every time it would take a step, it had a tail to crown relationship. It loaded the glute, and it pushed and rotated. I use the like centrifugal force explanation, but like today in the conversation, we was talking about the foot grabbing and pulling the ground back, right? But what it is it can be explained that way. It could be said that there's a level of
the energy's dumping down and out, and it creates this, it loads, right? Because we're loading and grabbing. You'll see Bolt come out the blocks, and he's got this moment where his hip goes boom, boom, and he goes to the next. So it's like the glute, the hamstring, all that. Look, that's why Nordic curls don't work. This shit don't work because that's not what happened. The bow's loading and it's releasing. So the hamstring, there's a, Coach Otis, he explains it real good, like there's a harmony to the body. When you take that harmony and you change it up, you fuck that whole system up. And then the athlete's at risk, he can't do this. Now we isolate the hamstring, straight line, straight line, straight line, straight line. That hamstring is going to react to the stimulus that you gave it in the weight room, on the field, and then it's repetitive. And it's like he's got hamstring trouble. No, he don't. He ain't got nothing wrong with his hamstring. You just fucking programmed it wrong.
Sure.
Go back.
Sure.
Reset it, recode it, open it up. If I don't open each space, I can't stack it back up. That's why the columns are first. Back chain dominant is second. Suppleness was third, but you could get all three of them at the same time. This start going from 6, 4, 2, bilateral, unilateral. Next thing you know, you're standing up in a reset with your knees sticking out in front of you, your head's in the column, and you can just stand there and hold it. Because you've taught that body how to build pressure the right way.
Yeah, one of the words I always loved, and I remember you taught me this a while back, is you said that word behavior. And we done hit on that word so many times. And that was a big sort of push that we tried to make for people. Is like, look, it's not, you're not isolating the body. Like, even if you're saying, well, I'm doing a bicep curl, like that's not what the brain's hearing. Like, maybe you think you're doing just a bicep curl, but you're actually doing a bunch of other things with that. Like you're patterning in a behavior on every single rep that we do in the gym, whether we accept that or not. And I think we originally were all training with like, well, it's back day, it's leg day, it's quads, it's hammy, it's calf, it's abduction, it's adduction, it's flexion, it's extension. It's like, maybe it is all of those things, but it's also behavior at the end of the day. And so you've got to ask first and foremost, what is that behavior that's going on at the foot level? What is that behavior that's going on at the the shin, the thigh? And I think we've put that cart, we put that in front of the horse. Essentially for us is we've said, let's focus on behavior. Let's focus on thinking with our skeleton, like a Russian doll effect. Let's get down to the deepest of the deep. Let's focus on the framework, the skeletal structure, which is essentially what Gilly observed at the outset, right? The beginning of this whole thing is you're identifying bony landmarks as the pressure is going in and out of the system. So you're saying things like second toe straight, inner ankle bone high, kneecap, chest pointing out, eye over the outside corner, nose over second toe. Those types of things are there for the act of, if we get the framework where it should be, then we start to ask, and that framework where it should be is centered around matching tape. Then we start to notice, hey, where do you feel it at, right? Where are the sensations? And you are building muscle, right? You are getting your range of motion back. Like you're getting the aesthetics, you're getting the range of motion back, you're getting access, you're getting space, you're getting flexibility, suppleness, all these different buzzwords that I think we maybe are going after first, when if we just thought about behavior and durability before that, and we made that the tunnel that we went through as the priority, then I think you're looking at it completely different. Because if you achieve durability, if you achieve behavior first, this is the GOATA Joe story, right? Like you guys first started off with this idea of like, let's just make someone secure. Let's just make them as secure as we can be. Let's focus on joint security, and then we'll deal with everything else. Because if your best ability is availability, if that's the case, then let's try to go for that first. And what did you guys notice? The bench goes up, the squat goes up, the vertical goes up, the 40 drops down. Everything from a performance standpoint came for free, but that wasn't even what you were focused on, right? You were just focused on joint security, and with a more secure, more durable system, it was also more efficient, and then its output, its performance, everything up leveled just by going through that durable lens. Whereas now if I'm thinking range, I'm thinking planes, I'm thinking strength, I'm thinking numbers, I could get some of that stuff. Like I can get stronger, I can get faster, but I never really address durability.
Yeah.
So then when I don't address durability, like we talked about in that one video that we dropped, you can be explosive as a WOTA. Like, you know, a backflip's very explosive. A high jump's very explosive. You can be explosive in that behavior. It just won't be able to be durable. And what our athletes need is durability, because it is a marathon. A season is essentially a marathon. And you've got to be, you know, able to go out there repetitively. It's not truly a 1 rep max.
Yeah,
I saw a bunch of questions come in.
You got Manuel Agba is in right now, and it's like, you know, he's like, man, I check all the boxes in the weight room, dog. Like I do everything right. I'm one of the top D linemen but I don't use my lower body. He's like, I can't fly out of my stance. I've been manhandling people. He's Nigerian too. He's got like this just regular, like, it's crazy strength. You know what I'm saying? So
dude, he's a freak. Yeah.
But the first time that I put him on the ball, he has no arch. He's completely collapsed, inside ankle bone low. The first time that I put him on the balls of his feet, he lasted like 15 or 20 seconds, and he was blown away. The dude came in for Mardi Gras and was going to basically do some work or whatever, and then got here and was like, holy shit, this is it. This is what I'm missing. Right. He just got a big check. He's got a couple of years, and he could end up being the highest paid D lineman, but he missed 8 games last year.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like he checked every box in the weight room and missed 8 games. So it's obviously not the weight room. We checking those boxes, but you duck-footed inside ankle bone low and front chain dominant. Let's check those boxes and then go back out there and see what happens. Right. Because I could tell you like this, I'll bet everything I got because I've already had twice and I've won both times. You're gonna be better. You're gonna do better. Somebody said, quick question: the eggshell heel is why the tib can externally rotate along with the femur. So I would say this, and Rick, you can answer it too. Sure. But let's go back to the behavioral thing that we said. If I'm constantly driving through the heel, what I'm doing is I am compressing the system. I am driving that heel into the ground, and just even if the joint takes over at some point. In other words, the heel goes down, it gets to a certain point, joint compresses, joint compresses, joint compresses. So you may be even creating a space that now you're used to the brain feeling the heel in the ground, so it don't have a problem with putting it there. If you go and we looked at a lot of the animal species and stuff like that, and the fastest animals in the world, their heel is this high off the ground. The paw's on the ground, the heel is way up here like that. So we knew that the sprinting and all, and then you look at the tippy-toe fast kid, the tippy-toe bow-legged kid's the fastest one at the park, and nobody can argue that, I don't think. But then we go and we take these guys and we back them down and we put them on their heels. Now, conceptually, as a strength coach, I always was like, well, shit, we're trying to train the glute and the hamstring. Of course, that's where we want to do it. But I didn't understand the foot and ankle complex because I viewed it as a condyle joint. It was supposed to hinge. It was supposed to dorsiflex, plantar flex. That is your hinge. Supination, pronation is the hinge on the other side. But we never looked at it as if that heel sat that high all the time, you would still be able to go through life. You could still get your ass back, sit down into a squat and rest on the eggshell heels. But if I take that system and start compressing it down, and that's all I'm doing, is saturating the nervous system with the heel in the ground, now I take that ankle complex and I start loading the joint. Then I load the knee joint and the hip or the lumbar instead of putting the muscles in there and let the muscles be the absorption, which
the
is
spring system. Yeah.
It loads, and then that's it. It becomes a spring system. It's dynamic. It's explosive, and it's not like riding in the car with no shocks.
Yeah. No, that's a great image to. I'm glad you brought up the animals. We talk about the big cat a lot. And this could be the wolf. It's a lot. It's all those animals they're all heels up. And if you took that animal and you were to stand it up and make it bipedal, the heel would get closer to the ground, but the force lines would still be the same, right? So, you know, I like the big cat better simply because it's a bigger paw. It's easier to look at. Whereas like the wolf is like really, the dog is a little bit skinnier at the foot and ankle, so it's a little bit more challenging to see that ankle actually play, to see their tib fib. But when you actually go underneath the hood, you're like, oh, it's all the same stuff. You know, It's got a platform, it's got a tib fib, it's got an Achilles tendon. And so to answer your question, the heel is essentially it's where the Achilles attaches to. So if this is my heel right here, my Achilles is going to plug in. Yeah, you see how there's like space, like it juts out
It shouldn't
behind?
touch. They
Right.
shouldn't touch each other.
Like it juts out behind because it's the attachment for the Achilles. So now that thing doesn't need to do anything but just stay at the very least hovering.
There you go.
And here's why, because if my Achilles is spiraled like this, okay? So in order to twist this thing properly, I can't have this moving. So what's happening is people are loading their foot inner ankle bone low, the heel's being loaded, and now this is happening to the Achilles. It's becoming linear and it's getting pulled on like this. Whereas if you just hold your heel up and it's always hovering and it's still, because your inner ankle bone high, now when the shin does its down, back, and out, you create this healthy integrity with the Achilles tendon. And this is the cycle. It's just boom, boom. It's just opening and closing, opening and closing.
That's your Achilles tendon. This is inside ankle bone low.
Yeah.
Heel in the ground. It's the ship. It's the rope that holds the ship. You start ruining the integrity of it.
Yeah.
And it becomes string cheese.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, it just pops. And it's over with. And the neurological side of it is if you're a linebacker, a basketball player, you taught athletic position. If I'm basketball, I'm here. Heels are up. I'm playing here. I'm butt back. I'm sitting back here, heels up. But I've been training heels down. So when I go forward and shoot a gap or cross somebody over, I've got to put my heel in the ground. I'm going here to go there. I'm going to do this. I'm going to step back. That's the false step. That's the 40-yard dash where they set up and the heel goes down and they pop up too fast because I've been doing this at Max Neuro Drive. And the coach is like, stop popping up.
Yeah.
If you pop up, you lose. We talk pad level. We talk athletic position. But we fucking do this.
Right.
It don't make no sense. It's not the way. It's not how it's supposed to be. Play on the balls of your feet, and then you'll have a first step off the ball of your foot instead of the heel. You got people tearing their Achilles left and right, and it's not when they go forward. It's on the way to try to go forward. They're going this way in the foot because the heel's trying to get to the ground because you told it to, and you going forward. You overextend that system. That in the controlled environment, you was breaking loose and then it pops.
Yep. Yep. No, it's a good point. It's just this harmony, guys.
Train and go to your failing.
Yep.
Bottom line.
So we had a question. So would you say posterior tibialis is the most important? So here's what I would say, going back to the behavior thing, is like, don't get locked in on one muscle. Because we all know and we can all agree that, well, it's not just one muscle working. So that becomes, it's just, I think we want to simplify. So we go to like, well, let me just strengthen this one muscle and then I'll be good. It's not that simple. Like we said, it's a behavioral thing. And like, this is what Gary and RJ and I are always talking about is like, man, what cues can we say to make, the behavior pop? When the reality is there's probably 10, 20 different ways to say the same thing, but the end result would be the same goal, which would be matching tape. So what I would say is, if you're matching tape, if you're matching the bow, if you're matching those global laws, like, to keep it simple, GOATA is only matching tape off of the global laws. So we're just trying to replicate those global laws in our own system. Now, when we do that, there's my guy Andreas, when we do that, then yeah, your posterior tibialis and your glute and all these other things that we have pinpointed as, hey, that seems to be important based off of maybe certain studies or certain aesthetics that we're seeing, and that all can be valid. But take all of it together and then go to that root cause, or that cornerstone of what we're saying is that just fix the behavior, just line up the bony landmarks, and then yes, you'll notice that the lateral calf starts to pop and the shin compartment starts to look better. And somebody mentioned their foot ligaments looking, deteriorated or atrophied. And we notice the vascularity at the foot level starts to show, and the toes start to spread, and the arch starts to pop, and the ankle gets skinnier, right? Like the ankle thins out a little bit and you can see the bones better, and the Achilles gets some of that, there's like chunkiness that starts to show around people that have Achilles tendonitis or tendinosis. And those things start to go away just by lining up the skeletal structure, and just by matching tape, and just by really focusing on where the pressure is. So when you're doing all those things, yeah, you'll get that benefit of like feeling your muscles get stronger in the right areas, but you won't have to isolate muscles in your training. You'll just be, you know, if anything, you're isolating global laws. If that kind of makes it a little bit easier for you, but you're integrating things.
Fractal of whatever pattern.
Yeah, it's a fractal.
If you work in the bow, you could go bilateral. It's 2 bows or 2 corners. If you split it, it's 1 pressurized column. Right. You know, because when you're in a split stance, you're either transferring it forward or backwards. Yeah. That's why we load the backdrop. That's why we load the front drop. That's why we got front drop and backdrop taps in Recode 225 to program the body in every direction. That's why we do the lateral bow work and stuff. Most of the time, when an athlete is transitioning laterally and it's little bows the whole time. It's never a corner. There's either a commitment. If you're on second, if you're on first and you're still in second, you're a baseball player, you butt back. You either gonna take 1 step into a bow and come back, or either you're gonna go. So the loaded leg is gonna bow. If you're a linebacker and you riding the running back, you're not crossing the feet over. You stay in bow, corner, boom. Yep. Like that, balls in the feet. You're never gonna be bow corner, bow corner, bow corner, bow corner. You would get juked and ran all over and all of that. And the thing is that's where the hinge foot comes in, because now you approach everything duck-footed and you don't have no glutes involved in it. You start dipping into your front chain. It's like the Cameron Batson ACL. He went to cut. He loads the front chain. He's front chain dominant. He gets duck-footed. Everything's going forward. The quad's on because you've been training the quad at max neural drive instead of the glute and the hamstring. Dude. The quad, huh?
Look at that
You
speed.
saw that shit, huh?
Oh, damn.
Lucky I ain't pinched that motherfucker. Got me fired up, dog. Don't come in my lot like that. You
don't even fucking get in my fucking space, dude.
Get out of here, dog.
End your shit like that.
Yeah. So when you take that hinge position and everything's going forward, now you can't load the bow and absorb energy. It goes into the front chain. Patella tendon pulls on the patella. The kneecap gets locked. Everything's stuck, and then it just falls apart. You tear your ACL. And then Jordan had the pattern because he didn't start lifting weights really until he was Air Jordan.
Like, I think Jordan didn't lift weights because he met Grover. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody's told me this, but I think there's a book, Jump Attack or something like that, Grover wrote. But I think Grover was kind of one of the first cats that talked about heels up and that kind of trained it. This is something that I heard through somebody else, so I could be wrong on that. But the other thing that I found interesting is that Jordan didn't really start lifting weights until, like Gary said, this is after Air Jordan. So you're looking at probably 88, 89. I think he had lost to the Pistons for probably the 3rd time, and he had to bulk up because they were literally kicking the shit out of him through as he went to the lane. So he put on, I think, 15 pounds of muscle. But remember, you're talking about close to 3 decades of no traditional weight training. So this is a young kid that is, he's kept his straight feet. He's kept his inner ankle bone high. What we try to get across to people is, and this is in the Institute, and some of the best work that I've ever studied was Muscles and Meridians by Phillip Beach. And he talks about this, in the embryological perspective of this thing, like it's a fractal, like it's designed a certain way inside the womb. And you see how the spiral tissue is spiraling inward on the baby. So the torso develops first, the legs spiral out inward, and then you pressurize that leg, and it like a pogo stick, it just opens and closes, opens and closes. So he identified that in the embryological perspective. Marianne Barbu-Roth was the person, it's on a Netflix series called Babies, episode 3, Crawling. She studied the moment right post-birth where you set the baby on the mother's stomach, and she observed the crawl pattern. And she said, there is a pattern, there is something that's already there that we don't have to work on. It just goes dormant because the baby's head is so big compared to the rest of its body, and it's like an astronaut coming back from space. It comes out of this liquid womb, and now it's got this head that's heavy, and it needs 6 to 8 months to strengthen. But what she observed was there's this natural urge for the baby to inch towards that breast for its first feeding. She did some observations. She studied slow motion video of that moment, frame by frame, and then she did some experiments where when she was able to account for the baby's head, she built this like little skateboard. And we've got this video. We voiced it over in the Institute, and you can see the pattern. Like you see these little bows and corners in this little baby that's like 12 hours old. They had old footage of like the 70s or 80s where they put a baby in liquid and you can see, or in water, and you see the swimming pattern, which is just crawling in water. And then she took it to the land, essentially, placed the baby on a skateboard, more or less. And you see the skateboard just kind of like wiggling down this thing. And she's just showing you like that kick that you're seeing in the womb. That's just the bow in the corner, like kicking out. Like it's this, and then it just pressurizes, and that's your thing. Like that's what you do. You pressurize legs and you launch them. And so what I'm saying is that we're all GOATAs. We're all built to bow and corner. That's the default system. Like
it's easy to restore.
That's why it's you're getting it back.
To take it away in a sense.
Yeah.
But that decoding could start immediately.
Immediately. And then think about Jordan back in, in the 70s or whatever. Like the further we go back, the more active the kids are, right? Everybody's wearing Chuck Taylors. They're wearing like a basic thin sole shoe that lets the foot be a foot a little bit. Now you look at kids and we got the big clunky shoes on, the tight toe boxes. The iPads are in we're more sedentary probably than we've ever been. And then on top of that, we have more specialized training than we've ever had. Like I don't think they had those options back then. Like the Jackie Robinsons, the Willie Mays, the Babe Ruths, the Michaels.
Dudes just played the game.
They just they didn't really have a choice, And then you look at someone like an MJ and they kept it. And that's why we speak so highly about fixing your standing, fixing your walk, because man, if it's in that walk and you can kind of get that swagger walk back, like the Randy Moss walk, the Ed Reed walk, the Michael Jordan walk, the AI walk, if you got that straight foot, the Ricky Henderson, the Willie Mays, I'm just thinking back, Jackie Robinson, Babe Ruth, if you got that straight foot walk, man, that's thousands of reps a day that are at least going to keep that ankle. And then, think of the opposite. You take, and this is a guy that I think of like a Lamar Jackson. Like Lamar was like, you look at high school Lamar Jackson and you're like, whoa, that's a GOATA. And then you look at it in college and you're like, whoa, he still got it. Now he's starting to get a little crooked foot. And then you start to see like, oh, the PCL starts to go. And then he starts to lose games on the back half of it because you change that foot behavior. You change that walk like Gary's been hitting on all day with all that fire about the ankle and playing it like a hinge versus playing it like a ball and socket. That's where the breakdown begins. And that's what separates GOATA from a lot of these other systems. At the root of it is that we're saying there's a design, and we're saying that design playing out at the foot and ankle, it's not in any textbook. No one's ever identified it. Gilly was the first person to identify, like, oh, the foot holds still and the shin turns. And then the only reason you're able to identify that is because you're finally looking at pressure moving in a system, and you can only see pressure when you go frame by frame. So now you've got a new blueprint. It's not available in any textbook. It's not available from Cadaver Science. Remember, you take Cadaver Science, you take the one thing that is needed to observe a healthy system, which is the pressure. And that's what's interesting. Like cardiovascular, we can touch, we can see the blood, right? Pulmonary, we can see the reaction of the air, right? Or the reaction of the lungs. Digestive, you can see the food moving through the system, but pressure is like this elusive. Like you can't touch it.
You can feel it.
But you can feel it.
Go inside and go low. You'll feel it come out your knee.
Right. But that's one of those things where it's like it's just been out of the equation from the study standpoint. And nobody's been studying pressure and its relationship to the musculoskeletal system. The only way to do that would be frame by frame. That's why when we go each frame, you're seeing like pressure, pressure, pressure. Like that's why we go slow with the coaches with their eyes. So when they land, it's like, hey, when the ground's here and the foot touches, the pressure's not there yet. Then there's like this absorption of pressure, and you're going to watch those next few frames, and you're going to say, does this foot do this as that pressure builds, or does this foot do this and hold still? And then as the pressure builds, it's just that ankle just opens, and then as it goes to transfer, boom, it just snaps. And there's really, Coach RJ brought this up, and it's a good point. It's in the Institute. We call it the tempo of the cycle. And the tempo of the cycle is like bow corner. Like the corner is a snap. It's just the same way you draw back a bow. You draw it back, it'd be a little bit longer here, and then boom, and it would just be one. And it would just be whop, a snap move. Like that's the snap move that you see is that nasty crossover. That's the snap move that you see on the downswing. That's the snap move that you see on the throw or the punch. But that pressure sort of allocating into the system is this like longer strengthening, holding of this bow and being able to control that in a very specific way, and then boom, just snap that thing and transfer it over to the other side, catch it, and then release it. But
Dude,
that's kind of, I don't know how I started
I
with
was
that. I just started
watching,
talking.
we got about 5 minutes. The other day I was watching, so I was studying like some like monkeys, and they were playing and they had their kids and all of that stuff like that. And it was like babies, like baby monkeys and all. And they were taking, and the mom kept peeling the baby off and throwing it. And it would step on it. And I was screen mirroring it. And Fallon's like, oh my God, look how they treating their kid. I'm like, no, they trying to get the motherfucker to do it on their own. Let the natural pattern, like it's innate for them. Like, get off me. You can't be on me. I'm like, you need to get your kids off of you. That's the problem. Like, get rid of them. Let them develop. Let them have their time on the ground to themselves. And that's what happened. That the little monkey would get away, and then she would get far enough away to where it couldn't catch up to her, and then it would draw back to the mom because that's where the food's at. Yeah. But it had to develop its way to get there. And that's where you see these animals come out, they birth, and then they get away from them, and then they can barely walk, and then within minutes and all, they up. Yeah. And it's like, we don't do that. We take them, we put them in these little stupid ass little bouncy things and shit like that. And we start taking that pattern away immediately. Yeah. That's the tough part about, because someone asked like, oh, how does Jordan keep it? It's like, well, it's like you said, it's just the environment, right? It's just a case of, it's just a case of like, it's just a case of like, you're constantly coding against the environment. Like there's always going to be information coming in, and you're essentially creating this backlog, this memory, if you will, that's going to be that subconscious behavior that you're going to call upon when the next thing presents itself. So like if we put, a tight toe box in there, or a tight belt around the kid, or some sort of, they're already in these high chairs, they're already in these, seats in the car, and these, the hell I'm missing on the, the carrier that you put them in right away. There's more stuff now to decode you than to keep you in your GOATA behavior. So that's what's happening, is that, I mean, I see it now, like I see it at these, like when all my kids are playing sports, so I'm seeing the young kids, and it's so obvious to see the kids that have kept the GOATA, and then you see the kids that have lost the GOATA. Yeah, and it's just a case of that. Like there's so many different, that's where it becomes a multitude of factors that can play a part in keeping it or losing it. I would say it's much easier to lose it, which is why you probably see less and less GOATAs as you go on. But if you go back to a place where it's like, when you look at, that's why the Karubo are so important in the Zoe, because you look at their environment, it's like, well, there ain't much shit there to lose it from. Yeah. So when you watch a Karubo, it's like, dude, everybody looks the exact same. Well, it's like, there's nothing there. There's nothing there to pull the GOATA out. They're butt naked. They're barefoot. They're resting on the ground. What's there to make them WOTA? Right? Well, there's not much to make them WOTA. So everybody just develops into a GOATA, or stays GOATA from the beginning all the way to when they're adult. That's why their adults move around like babies. They look like adult babies when they walk around. Their feet are all straight, their ass is back, their spine is nice and long, their chin is tucked. All that stuff's there because they never lost it. Well, now look at our society. Think of how much different shit is there on a day-to-day to bring you into WOTA. Now look at the disparity that you think you see in movement. Oh, yeah, everybody moves differently. It's like, no, it's really just GOATAs and WOTAs, and then it's this crazy blend inside that spectrum. Whereas when you take away all the WOTA stimulus, everybody generally just stays on the GOATA side, because that's so deeply embedded. They need everybody to move different, because otherwise their system don't fit in. There's no sidewalks, there's no cars, there's always like every step is calculated on the turf that they're in. Every step is slightly different. That you gotta handle the ground differently if you're a Karubo tribesman. You're not just walking around slapping your fucking big ass shoes on sidewalks that are already etched out for you. You've got all these different nuances. Go walk around barefoot in the woods. Tell me you're not a little more back chain dominant and a little more heels up. I promise you, you're not on your heels. You ain't just going to be all fucking, you're going to be like alert. You're going to be that we talk about clearing the room, like the Navy SEAL clearing the room, or the Hods are coming around the tree. Those fuckers look exactly the same. Like they are like eyes open, alert. There's that great video of the tribesmen kind of chilling, kind of walking. They hear like the slightest thing, and then bam, the tail shoots back, the crown shoots forward, and they're just in it. They're ready to go. It's the same way you'd clear the room. Like there's just this heightened sense that is needed
in the wild, dude, you got walls around you, you got sidewalks, you're not even close to what these people are. And that's why I laugh at people that are like, oh, the indigenous, yeah, they're primitive and they die young. It's like all that shit's lies.
It is.
If you take those people, they are so much stronger than you. They are so much more resilient than you. I promise you.
I got them pictures. They got to be 120 in some of them pictures.
Dude, I don't want a Karubo tribesman. I don't want a Karubo tribesman to get his hands on me. I couldn't imagine what that strength is like. It's like, dude, they would tear you apart. They would absolutely tear you in half.
Somebody said, how does GOATA work with ligament tear injuries? The same way that, like, if it's torn and I mean, that's where the doctor comes in, right? They repair and then we rebuild the right way. Physical therapy is all messed up. In the book, it says feet under knees. Can you explain it? Don't fool with
the book needs to be, we're going to write a new book. Yeah. So the book needs to be, this is what I would say. The education's in the Institute. Okay, so the full education is on GOATAinstitute.com. The book was an initial start. So many things have been cleared up from that point till now that I would not tell anybody to go to the book to learn GOATA. We've evolved so much since that thing was written. It was a good start, and it got some ideas out there. It got some of the basics, the same stuff. But like how we've brought this pattern back into a human body, you're not going to get that as well as you would get it in GOATAinstitute.com. I'm not saying that it's, you're going to fail. I'm just saying like there's just so much more that's been developed and sort of evolved from that initial starting point that if someone's looking for the education, I would go and I would look at GOATAinstitute.com.
Listen, somebody asked, this is a good question too, because people get confused. Why is it that some people favor one side when squatting or hitting? Not that question. No, the second part of that is they favor one side because it depends on who it is. If they've been driving for 5 years, they got a right foot that sticks
Look
out.
at me.
They can't.
I'm leaning on my left side. That's my subconscious thing. I always got to get. I'm like, get out of
it. A little bit off the topic, but how does back chain? How back chain dominant would help a pregnant woman if they carry weight in the front? Listen,
that's where this whole behavioral thing comes in, right? Back chain dominant is not a shape. It's a behavior that when you look at it from a static view, it presents itself a certain way, but the behavior of back chain dominance is what you want. Back chain dominance is the body being driven through space by the glute and the hamstring, okay? That's why we don't do a glute exercise or a hamstring exercise. We behave to build the back chain. So if I'm training the back chain and I want to create back chain dominant behavior, well, I know I got to be inside ankle bone high, so I could exaggerate inside ankle bone high. I could get the butt back, and then I could just work back here. Now, what starts to happen is these muscles are being worked. This is my rep now. This isn't my rep. So now I'm just always on back here. So I'm back chain dominant. I keep the back chain turned on. Now I'm a front chain down. I sit too much and I'm just GOATA, right? But what I'm saying is it doesn't matter where the weight's at. If the behavior's been a certain way the whole time, all they're going to do is carry the weight wherever the weight's at.
Yeah.
So if you notice, though, a lot of women have back problems after pregnancy. It happened to the Williams sister. She had a lot of GOATA in her. She did a lot of things right. And she was a lateral person. She set bows. She set corners. She did it right. She moved in the pattern. She got really strong. But she played tennis more than she did anything. So she was able to keep that pattern. So when she had the baby, what did she do? She sat down more. She got into her front chain more. And then you start to compensate the behavior to maybe the shape a little bit or something like that. But you start to reform to the chair and you start to change the way that, and then the behavior changes and then you can't get it back because the people around you don't know what back chain dominant is. Or they don't know how to create it or restore it. That's what GOATA is. Yeah. But you got to go back all the way to the beginning of this conversation and you go back to where does it start at? It starts at right here. The same way that we repair that tendon. We get the tendon fixed, we come back to the ground, we reset, we start over. We reverse engineer movement to build it back up to what it's supposed to be. That supreme blueprint. It's why GOATA has an elderly community. No other program in the world says that 80-year-old can move like that. the 95-year-old tribesman could still hunt and run around and sit into a deep squat. No other program in the world tells you that. All you got to do to achieve it is fucking walk right. And you get it. But if you lost it, you got to recode.
Yep. I think a lot of women go into pregnancy with bad patterns, obviously. And then, you know, another issue is think about the actual birthing moment. We're so conditioned to be laying on a table, essentially laying on a chair, if you will, tilted this way in the front chain. When you look at natural birthing, it's all back chain dominant. Like they got their hands on maybe a tree, the tail shoots back. They get more so into the corner. You know, you get into the corner, you kind of open the pelvis floor a little bit. You get the corner position. That's why like all fours is super helpful during that moment leading up to birth, because it's back chain dominant. Like all fours is literally tail to crown for free. That's why we start there, because it literally sets the tail behind the crown, and you're at that first moment where it's like, okay, now I'm organized. So that's why it's already in there naturally. We're just very, very unnatural with how we handle birthing as a society, because that's just a number. That's just a bed inside of a hospital, and we're trying to get that bed to be filled by somebody else.
Yeah.
That's really the issue that's rooted in. And then all the other shit that's surrounding it, you know, you're already going into it with, if a mother goes into it inside ankle bone low with no bow, then you put the baby in there. It's like, man, that's really tough. Like, just imagine being a WOTA, and then you strap a heavy weight vest on the front of your body and try to walk around. It's like the same concept Gary's talking about with the Recode. We got to get you decompressed first. So that's why I recommend if ladies are going through that, a lot of groundwork is great for you. A lot of simple, just getting back to all fours and just kind of hanging out in all fours, getting the inner ankle bone high, getting the tail to crown right, getting the tailbone to lift, and just maybe staying there for a little bit. And then, you know, you have sometimes moms that are pregnant, they got a couple other kids in the house. And I've seen it with my own wife. You know, you're trying to feed the baby at night, and you're in this soft, weird bed, and the pillows, and one shoulder gets pulled down, and you're only holding the kid on this one side, and you're trying to cook on the other, deal with the other kids. It's just like, dude, there's a lot of crap that's going on that's already WOTA, and that's a challenging situation in and of itself. But nonetheless, it'd be the same behavior to fix it. But I know you got to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to go. My guest just showed up for the podcast. But listen, get your information from the source. Like there's a lot of stuff that's out there that people don't fully understand, and they not plugged in. And I'm not trying to call nobody out or nothing, but you come to the GLS pages. You come to GLS GOATA. You go to GOATA Movement. You go to that. If you want the information and you want the truth, that's where you go. If somebody's sitting up there parroting what we're saying, it's probably got some element of it that's not all the way correct. Can those people help you? Yes, because we've created a system that if you execute that system, it'll work for you and it'll help you. Find you a GOATA coach. Make sure they're using the app or whatever. They got a lot of people getting educated out there right now. Feb 50 will get you 50% off on the way. You go buy a year right now, this shit, for $300. Don't play with that shit. Don't play with your life. Don't put your hands in somebody else's shit. If it's looking to you and it makes sense, fucking buy that shit. Go try it. You can do it for $35, but you get one chance to get 50% off.
Right.
Feb 50 at Recode. Don't go to GoTaMovement.com to buy it. Certifications, $12.99 right now. You get a lifetime of Recode 225 on there. $1,299 get you a lifetime with an affiliate link.
And the Institute. So you got Institute for life, you got Recode 225 for life, and then you'll be an affiliate with Recode 225, meaning you'll earn 30% back on any sale, including renewals that you make. So like I said, we're building the website, we're building the system, we're trying to make it simple and accessible to you all, and we appreciate, Feb 50. Someone asked Feb 50, F-E-B.
It's all
50.
over our page.
Yeah, we'll keep it in the stories. But we appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll get this thing up on YouTube, and then we'll drop it in the stories, and we'll just keep pumping content. Like I said, drop questions in the comment sections. I don't care which comment section. Drop questions on the DMs, and we'll try to hit those each week when we do these.
My name's Keyshawn.
All right.
All right, dude.
All right, I'll talk to you.
See y'all later.
Yeah, go to movement.com. You got it. Peace.